Welcome to Passing the Plate, the podcast that's all about food, traditions, and the wonderful connections they create. I'm Lisa Lisson, the genealogist and family history expert behind Are You My Cousin?
And I'm Ashley Covelli, the food writer and recipe developer behind Big Flavors from a Tiny Kitchen. We'll be your guides on this flavor-packed adventure. We're not just talking about recipes. We're diving into family history, exploring new cultures, and preserving favorite recipes for future generations. In short, we're celebrating the stories and tastes that come with every bite.
So grab a seat at the table and let's embark on a journey of flavor, tradition, and connection. This is Passing the Plate, where every episode is a feast for the senses and a celebration of the ties that nourish our souls.
In this episode, we're exploring family history, but with a unique twist. Join us as we discuss how food can serve as a time capsule, preserving moments, memories, and cultural heritage. Okay, Lisa, you intrigued me when you brought up this topic. What does this look like?
Well, I've been doing genealogy research for quite a while, and in my own personal genealogy research, I actually inherited a large collection of old family photographs.
Ooh.
So essentially, when I started getting interested in learning more about the family history, doing the actual research for building that family tree, I was talking to my relatives. I was talking to aunts and uncles and cousins, and they were like, oh, this is great. And next thing I know, they're cleaning out their closets because they have all these photographs and all this family, ephemera that they've been storing. And they were like, we don't really know what to do with it. We don't want to get rid of it. It's important. We recognize there's some importance here, but we're not really that interested in keeping these things and storing these things.
They can add up. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, and it was wonderful. People, I can remember showing up at Thanksgiving dinner and my aunt had literally boxes in her trunk of photographs and old family papers and letters. And then, going to my mailbox, snail mail, and finding literally photographs, original photographs that were like 100 years old sitting in my mailbox. The photographs were important. So I had a lot of photographs and I started to go through them. And it was interesting. A lot of them had to do with food or events surrounding the food. So not so much food like we take food pictures now of everything we eat, on social media. But what I was able to do by using them, and as a genealogy researcher, I do recognize that photographs are more than just images. They function as resources or just like we would take a historical document to evaluate for family clues. We can absolutely and have to with family photographs.
I feel like especially with, film photography, which I love. I used to do 35 millimeter film photography in high school and college. And like that, especially way back when the film was not cheap. Like, so if you wanted to take a photo of something, it had to be important. It wasn't just like now where you can take a picture of everything with your smartphone. Like there's a reason. So like you were saying, it was a lot of celebrations and everything. That makes a lot of sense. That's what would be documented in photos, not just like the outfit you're wearing today and what you did with your hair and what you're eating for breakfast.
Right.
Your
it was
workout
about
at the
occasion.
gym. Yeah.
It was about occasions. A lot of times it was an occasion that was happening that was doing that. And so when you look at photographs like that, what we see from, say, the eye of a researcher and a family historian, I'm looking at tradition. I'm evaluating the source of tradition, innovation, personal narratives that actually would actually be happening around that table and who was there and why they were there. So that's why I thought it would be a really fun thing to discuss some of these photos, these food-oriented photographs and how to look at those family photos and really kind of decide, well, what does it tell us in our focus on culinary heritage? What is it telling us about our culinary heritage?
Yeah.
So
I love that. I always find new ways of thinking about things when we have conversations because you come at it at a different angle that it's like, well, yeah, that it makes so much sense and it's right there in front of you, but you wouldn't necessarily as a non-researcher think to look at it from that angle. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is fun to do. And you have to sometimes kind of sit back and think, what else can I think? What else can I get out of this picture? As we talked about, what we're looking at on these family photographs, I absolutely love to find the family reunion photographs. And these have been around for a long time. In fact, the one I showed you, I know, actually is a photograph. It's a very casual photograph. It's actually, in today's standard, if we saw this on our phone, we would probably just delete it. So what it is, it's a family photograph from, say, I would say around 1944, 1945, 46, somewhere in that time period. And it's a table of food. It is a mother helping a daughter get her food. And then we have the people all milling around behind it. So nobody is actually, as you look at this photograph, nobody's actually even looking at the camera.
Yeah,
so,
it's very candid.
Very candid photograph. So I have to actually think it was to kind of get a general wider view of the food on the table. And so,
and we'll link this, we'll add this to the show notes page so you can see what we're talking about if you're curious.
Absolutely. So all the photographs that we kind of talk about here in this very non-visual format of a podcast, we will actually have on our show notes. So I definitely want to encourage you to visit the show notes for this episode with that. But when I pulled this photograph out and discovered it within the collection and started looking at it as a family historian, I realized I was literally looking at my Southern heritage on a table, on a covered, what we would call a covered dish table. I think some people might call it hot pot, but a potluck dinner.
Potluck, yep.
And so one of the first things that you have to think about when you find these type of photographs is, what was the occasion of this particular photograph? Why was it taken? And in this case, this was a birthday party. This was the annual family gathering for the birthday party of the patriarch of the family, who was actually in the photograph. He's the bald man, kind of standing in the center, half. You can barely see Grandpa Suggy. And so, and he would have been, at this point, he would have been well into his 80s at this point.
See, and now that you say that, is that on the far right? Is that a birthday cake, maybe?
On the far, yes, actually. I'm not sure if it's an actual birthday cake, but it is the cake. And that is the dessert section of the way this family would have laid out their table. That. And it is definitely a white cake with a white icing.
And not just because it's in black and white.
And not just because it's in black and white. I actually have a colorized version of this. I actually took this photograph and colorized it over at MyHeritage. And
cool.
Have a colorized version of it. I can put that in the notes as well.
Yeah.
But definitely you would see that white cake. This white cake on the right side would have also been very common at any family gathering. It's a basic layered cake. For very special occasions, probably a little bit later in time, we might see a coconut. Because some of the family members really liked coconut. It would not have been traditional by any standard as far as, representing a Southern roots type of thing, other than, they liked it. It would have been a little pricey, so it would not have been made except on special occasions.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And we know you're not a fan of coconut, so you would have been fine with it. I'd have been fine
just straight vanilla. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can actually see on the far left side of that photograph, stack of sliced white bread.
And now, I thought that was sandwiches.
Yeah.
I thought it was a stack of sandwiches.
I have no, and it was there probably, well, I was going to say to actually eat, to make sandwiches with, but honest, a lot of times we would just, in this, you would find, you might have your fried chicken and then you might have a piece of white bread to go with it. Maybe if they didn't make something. So, but for whatever reason, that would be common to see with that family. There's fried chicken on that table, which absolutely indicates, a good Southern covered dish there, right?
The first thing I noticed is the big white pot. Is that soup?
So I actually thought it was, but I was able to ask my mom, who is actually the little girl in the picture.
Oh, and stop. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I actually thought that it was like a soup or like a Brunswick stew. And she said, actually, in this particular, while at other families, it might have been, in this particular photograph, that was probably a pail of water to drink.
Oh, okay.
And that surprised me. But do you know why?
Why?
Because if you were to really look at this particular photograph, and I've done entire webinars on this. If you really look at this house and back out the photo, look at the roof, look at what you're seeing, there are no power lines to this house. Okay, so this house didn't really have a lot of resources, and so they would have had to probably, it is very possible they would have had to pull the water from the well, and so they would have had to have pulled it that way. So, or even if they had it in the kitchen, they would have brought it out to divvy it out that way at the table. So, but you're right. I certainly would have assumed that would have been more of a.
I'm also seeing like a jar kind of right in the middle there. Is this some sort of like preserves, or do you know?
Yeah, actually. So that is actually they canned their own. They had a farm, so they canned their own vegetables. And this was either squash or it may have been pickles. We're not 100% sure on that, but it would have been probably either one of them.
Love
it is
that.
not beans in this case, though. They would have canned beans as well. So you can see this is a very typical looking table right there in front of us. So
I love that. And absolutely. I love the order of like, you got your bread and your chicken, and then you got your condiments, then you got your drinks and desserts. Like, it does make sense now that you're saying it, seeing it kind of laid out in the progression of the meal.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool? And the other thing to look at is, a lot of these people in this photograph, even though they're not necessarily looking at the camera, have been identified. And so it does tell us from a family historian, not only what did the family eat, but it tells us who showed up. So who was important to this family.
Yeah.
I don't mean that to sound quite so dramatic, but, who lived close enough by that they could actually come.
Right.
So this is important types of thing. And if you look at the very back right-hand corner, do you see the woman with the hands on her hip? Mm-hmm. She got elbows out. She's the woman in charge.
Oh, supervising.
So you can actually get that personality.
Oh, yeah.
She was a no-nonsense, kind of person, and she was keeping an eye on everything happening.
The other thing I love about this, not from a food standpoint, but from just like a general observation, is that all the men are in suits and most of them have hats on. So it's like they were dressed for an occasion. They weren't just like hanging out and not that they had sweats back in these days, but like I feel like that was so much more common in that time to like, you're leaving the house, you look ready to go to somewhere special.
Yes. At this time period, definitely you would have shown up wearing, your, I almost want to call it your Sunday best, but this is an occasion. This is a birthday party. This is a celebration. So definitely you would show up wearing that kind of thing. So
very cool picture. And I love getting the additional context behind it, because I've seen this picture before through some of the stuff we've done together, but I feel like I know so much more about your family because of it. And I love that that's your mom in the center. That's so like just. And
that's my grandmother too. Yeah, that's my grandmother too. They're actually helping. I think what I've really picked up, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but they're actually, that table still looks really full. They're serving the children first to get this, so the children can go and do their thing, and then the adults can sit and do because I see on the right, you can really only see the top of the head of the woman bending over. She's actually bending over another child, helping her as well.
Oh. So, Yeah, get the kids out of the way so that the adults can
and kind of
keep them entertained.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just so much you can pull out, certainly the food thing, but all the other pieces of it. Like I said, I've taught entire webinars on this.
I'm
Actually,
curious
I can link
about
that in the comments.
That'd be great. I'm curious too about on the farthest left, like the full person, not the one that's cut off. It looks like a very mysterious woman in a suit top, maybe? Do you know who that is? Is that an unidentified?
I'm not 100% sure who that is, but it's actually, I think it looks a little more mysterious because the photo's a little darker. I think when I actually have a version where I've lightened it up, and she's wearing almost like a collar, maybe with almost a sweater type thing over it. So,
okay.
I believe this would have been, I can't remember the date off the top of my head as far as time of year, but I think this was a fall time period.
Yeah, because your grandmother is wearing short sleeves, although I am pro layers, and I'll do short sleeves all year round with just sometimes a sweater over because, get warm, especially when you're like cooking and entertaining and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I love that.
We hope you enjoy listening to Passing the Plate, and we'd love it if you added a pinch of spice to our recipe by leaving us a review. It lets others know what they're in for and helps us keep serving up these delicious, heartwarming stories.
So after you devour the latest episode, pop open your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more delicious adventures with you on Passing the Plate. We have another photo from Lisa's archives that when I first looked at it without any context, my guess would be it's like an anniversary celebration. There's a woman holding a man's wrist and he's cutting a cake, and it looks like there's an older woman in the background kind of, again, supervising. And it looks like a dinner table, and I see maybe like hard-boiled or pickled eggs and like some red cabbage. And maybe they're on to dessert. So it seems like a celebration. Again, probably a white cake. Am I anywhere near the ballpark of what's going on in this photo?
I think you're close.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. So this particular photograph, and again, so for those of you who are listening, I know you're not seeing it, there's an older woman, very small, petite older woman, and off to one side.
With an apron, it looks like.
With an apron on, yes. And so she would have been, that was actually my great-great-grandmother. Then there is a couple, a man and a woman, dressed in, not fancy, but dressed nice. White top. Both of them have white shirts
Collared
on.
shirts,
It looks like she has a skirt. Actually, she might have an apron on too. Now that I look at it, he's got, pants, belt, etc. And as Ashley said, they're cutting a cake. And I did reach out to cousins and who would have been children at the time the photograph was taken. And they actually, other than helping me maybe guess who, take a stab at who the couple is, they really couldn't remember anything else about the photograph. They didn't recognize what was going on. There is a part of me that wonders if this is an anniversary type of photograph. Possibly a reception of some point of some type. Yeah. I don't know enough about the couple to be able to say this is like I almost had wondered at one point if it was a wedding type of reception, but I didn't think so given the older woman doesn't look dressed for that type of occasion.
Right.
So I wondered if it was a birthday party perhaps that might have been done, because they do, and I think part of it is the pose of the couple with her holding his wrist, cutting the cake. So there are not many occasions where you have a man and a woman cutting a cake together other than
a wedding,
right? Yeah. So that's a possibility that's going on. Definitely we have, do you notice, Ashley, it's that white cake? The white cake again.
Yep. So and it looks like maybe cherries on top, or maybe they're little flowers.
Yes. So I'm wondering if it's cherries, maybe like the little jarred maraschino type cherries that might have been. This was taken in Virginia, this South Central Virginia. So we would not have had at this point, or they would not have had, you wouldn't get those cherries like you would, say, from Washington State. That they, you just wouldn't get that here. Definitely the eggs to the right that you mentioned. Absolutely, probably the boiled eggs. They don't look like they've been made into develed eggs at this point.
No, but we
which
love
kind
a
of
deviled
surprises
egg.
me a little bit, to be honest, because
isn't that like mandatory at Southern gatherings?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And and they are a farming family. They would have had chickens. These would have been their own chickens.
Well, and then talking about cherries in the foreground, something that's cut off, it almost looks like kind of like a pineapple upside down cake. I have like a ring of pineapple with the cherry in the middle.
Yes. You know what? I had not noticed that. That is a really good catch. And that would have been an occasion type cake because that would have been canned pineapple.
And would it be common to have two cakes?
I wouldn't necessarily think so, but at the same time, this is a very large family. So I don't know the actual occasion. But, I mean, there were a lot of kids in this family to begin with. And then you throw in the grandkids. So, I wouldn't be surprised at that.
I think what's interesting to me is the mix of, like, it's clearly we're starting a dessert course, but that, like, all the other food is still there. Because I feel like a lot of times if I've been to, because this looks like in somebody's home, that everything gets taken away and then the dessert comes out, like to make room for that. So I think that's one of the things that was interesting to me when I first, because you can see there's a lot of little plates and bowls of food kind of off on the perimeter. And it looks like maybe a gravy boat in between the cake and the potential pineapple upside down cake.
Yes, it's possible. Gravy boat. It may be a depression cut depression glass type of
just like a bowl,
something. Yeah, that was what I saw it as, more like one of the what they call depression glass type of serving dishes. And
then we have wine glasses with ice water, it looks like.
Yes,
or vodka. Who knows?
Not going to be vodka for this family, honey.
That'd be a large.
Actually,
amount.
It's ice water. I think I believe it's ice water, which would have been pretty normal. The red cabbage you mentioned, I'm not so sure that's red cabbage because
could be the coloring on the photo.
I think it's the coloring of the photo. So this one has been faded out quite a bit, and I do have a version I can put in the show notes of that has been the color's been corrected. I've run it through photo editing type software. There's so much of that out there, and that really helps you sometimes figure out what's on the table when you run it through some of those types of photo. You can actually do it over on Canva, but you could do it. The free version of Canva does that, but there are programs like VividPix, Restore, which will improve the coloration on your photographs so that you can get a better idea. A lot of the genealogy databases are out there now will do the same thing.
Yeah.
PhotoMine will do the same thing as well. So I can put links to all of those kinds of things in the show notes for you if you have photos you want to do of your own that way.
Absolutely. I feel like seeing these kind of photos from you, it occurs to me that I don't have a lot of family around the table type photos. So aside from my son currently being in the age where he's not fond of photos being taken of him, I feel like we just kind of don't have as many gatherings of this sort where we would get a photo like this. And so it's kind of funny, like thinking about a food photo that brings up family memories. Mine is, doesn't involve any actual food or people, but I have it on my website still because it's St. Patrick's Day one year. I had a tradition of making corned beef and cabbage in the slow cooker, which corned beef and cabbage I never had before I moved to New York, but my father-in-law used to always make it. So I had kind of taken over making it, and we had him and my mother-in-law over for dinner, and I got home from work, and usually after that's been cooking in the slow cooker all day, it smells, cooked cabbage doesn't have the most pleasant bouquet necessarily. There's an aroma, and I was like, oh, the house doesn't smell like cabbage. That's kind of weird, but okay. And I went over and I opened the lid. Well, I could see through the lid because it had a glass lid on the top of my slow cooker. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. It stayed green. It usually melts down and gets kind of like translucent looking, And then I realized it didn't actually cook. My slow cooker had died. So I had raw meat that had to go in the garbage, cabbage with, just the whole thing had to go. And we ended up going to a diner. Actually, that brings us back to the last episode. We went to a diner for a holiday meal for St. Patrick's Day. We had corned beef and cabbage at the diner. But the reason it was so particularly memorable, aside from RIP, my slow cooker, is I didn't realize at the time I was pregnant, and I had had a sip of a Guinness and I just wasn't feeling like drinking it. And so I was like, I gave the rest to my husband, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So it was just kind of, so like, that's a very memorable food photo for me that brings up a lot of family connection and food connection, but there's neither in the actual photo.
But I love that because it does spark that memory, that share, that it sparks that memory. It sparks a lot of joy, obviously, when you remember that. And I think that's what the photos do. It is interesting that I don't know that we really do as many around the tables anymore, just as a general photograph type photography style. And I don't know, maybe that's just our family now, but I think with social media coming into things that and into play, it's not necessarily the occasion to take pictures of the photographs of the food. I know that when we get together as a family, I do have one side of the family that gets together every year. In fact, I even got an email about it this morning about the weekend before Christmas. We get together for a dinner, and everybody brings something. But I honestly don't know if people really take pictures of the food anymore. It's really, more of each other. They might. I'm going to pull those out and look at them again. Yeah. Take a second look at them again as we go. But it is fun when if you have photos from multiple years, a similar event over years, you can see the progression of foods and what kind of comes into vogue and, comes into popularity and what kind of falls out, because it absolutely does.
Like aspic Jell-O molds type of thing when those left the table.
Thank goodness they left the table.
I feel like I have memories of, back when I was in the Midwest with, my mom's side of the family. I remember getting together for like Christmas, Thanksgiving, having big gatherings. And I remember sitting around the table, but I don't know that anybody took any photos of any of it. So that's kind of a bummer. So maybe I need to try to, even if it's not family, it can be friends. It doesn't have to be, just anybody you care about, I feel like it could be nice to try to make more of an effort to encapsulate the experience by taking a photo of everybody sitting around the table.
I think so too. In the second photo that we took, I honestly don't know that they're really taking a picture of the food, and we just happened to be a byproduct for us. They were actually, this photo is actually of the couple being, with that photograph. So yeah. Anyway, so it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to look at those photographs and look at them at different angles, or viewpoints, not so much angles, but looking at them from a different viewpoint. Am I looking at the food? Am I looking at the people? And then taking it from there. So that's a real fun thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa, talking about the person was probably trying to take a picture of the couple, not the food. When did people having cameras at home kind of become a thing for them to document occasions like this? Because I know way back in the day, you would go have your portrait taken somewhere. But when did like actual personal cameras become a thing? Because to those listening who were born later than us, we didn't always have phones in our pockets everywhere, or phones with cameras in our pockets everywhere. And so it was a little more novel for quite a while.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's a really great question. So photography has been around for quite a number of years. But by around 1900, the Kodak they came out with the Brownie camera. And what this was really the first time that a camera being able to take pictures with the film really was affordable for the general public. So we would definitely have photographs, previously we've all seen a lot of the older antique photographs. You go into any antique store, go on eBay, you're going to see, all kinds of antique photographs there. But it was really with the Brownie camera coming into being that all of a sudden folks could take photographs. And we start to see more of this happening. And so that was really around the time that one of my great-grandmothers, my great-grandmothers in general, were coming of age. Right. And so they really embraced it. One of my great-grandmothers really embraced this whole photography thing as far as taking pictures. And I have hundreds of photographs from that side of the family. And it's a really fun way of being able to see all of a sudden kind of that daily life, what they were doing on some of them were still very kind of formal or posed pictures, but then we get these more casual photographs as we come forward. And that's when I think one of the things I love about seeing that is that we see more frequent photographs and we start to pick up a little more of the personality of the individual. Because yes, it's a photograph, but when you can see them, when you can see what's happening in that photograph, you can pick up those telltale clues that you would never pick up when you're researching them from a straight genealogy perspective of looking at a deed, looking at a census record. You just can't pick that up sometimes from those records.
Right. Well, and that actually brought it into people's homes. So instead of the photographs you're seeing being in a photographer's studio, or something like that, you're actually seeing a slice of their personality, even by the surroundings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
You
can see, you can see, we call that social history, but you can see, what their house looked like. And so it speaks to their socioeconomic status. So yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful way to do it.
I noticed in that second picture that we looked at, there's the cabinet in the back looks like, I don't know if it's like a china cabinet, but you can see a couple, like maybe a milk little pitcher with a pattern on it. So maybe that has to do with her history, like when that was a really big thing to have those pieces kind of locked away in the cabinet, either for special occasions or for if something happened and you needed the money from them.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at that table with the types of dishes, I mean, those are really nice glasses that are sitting out there. You've got those depression type, what they call depression glass bowls, which are really quite lovely. Antique bowls. So yeah, or antique now. I don't know.
Yeah,
antique now. So anyway, but yeah. So
very cool. Thank you so much for giving us a new way to kind of look at old photos, because I feel like, again, I wouldn't have necessarily read so much into what's happening in the photo without talking to you about this kind of stuff. So I think that's really cool. And if you get a recipe for that possible pineapple upside down cake, It looks really good.
Oh, okay. I'll reach out. I'll have to ask some folks to see if that side of the family has one.
What if there was like some great recipe for that and like we only found out because we were staring at this old photo, you know?
I'm going to have to reach out to the family.
We'll do a follow-up episode if that's a thing. I will try to recreate for science.
Scientific purposes, definitely. Yes. Definitely. All right, guys, well, be sure to check out our upcoming Facebook Live with MyHeritage on Monday, November 25th at 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll also be having Daniel Horowitz, the genealogy expert from MyHeritage, on the December 19th episode of Passing the Plate. You can find the links from today in the show notes at passingtheplate.org/44.
That's a wrap on this episode of Passing the Plate. We hope you enjoyed our journey into the world of food, traditions, and the amazing connections they create.
It's been a pleasure sharing these stories and flavors with you. Remember, food is more than just sustenance. It's a way to connect with our past, present, and future.
So keep sharing your meals, keep passing those plates, and keep creating memories that will last a lifetime. Head to passingtheplate.org/podcast for show notes.